Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is a hot summer day here in Atlanta, and we're glad to be back with our webinar series. We did take a little time off, but we are kicking it back in full swing, and we are super excited to have our very own expert, Cecil Bullard with the Institute, here with us today. Before we get started, as always, we're going to kick off with some housekeeping notes. We are recording this session, so if for any reason you need to drop off, you get busy, or for whatever reason your internet fails you today, please do not worry. We always send out the recording no later than Monday of the following week, and then we also always post the recording on our website under the resources tab on autoleap.com. So to kick it off, I do want to also say we are on webinar, so you guys are not on video, you do not have voice, but you do have functionalities so that you are able to enter in your questions. Depending on how the session is going, I will weave them in for Cecil. We'll do a few here and there during the session, but if not, we'll kind of leave the majority to the end so that we can make sure that we get through the content and you guys really get the full scope of this expert session. So today we're going to talk about the 5 steps to grow your margin and be more profitable. Why are margins so important? Well, they basically help you become more profitable. So again, today we have Cecil Bullard, the CEO of the Institute at Automotive Business Excellence in Ogden, Utah. And really the things that we're going to take away from this is understanding your margins, improving your labor margins, and reaching target margins. So Cecil, I'm going to pass it over to you. And once again, we really appreciate your time and being here with us today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was going to ask you if you would pay attention to the questions, but you already answered that. So we do like questions, especially if they're about the material. So don't feel free to ask. And I would say there are no dumb questions, really. But there probably are a couple, but most of them are not. So do your best. What you're seeing right now, there's a QR code there. There is a simplified workbook. It's really just a slide set with some notes. There is parts margin, and there are there's a calculator there that you can get a hold of if you fill that out. So you'll see that a couple of times throughout the thing, and then again at the end. Why are margins important? Let's kind of start with that. If you're doing, I don't know, $1 million in business, and your gross profit margin, which should be somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 62%, if you're loading your labor. Loaded labor means I'm taking into account all the costs, FICA, FUTA, workers' comp. If you're not loading your labor, you probably want to be closer to 74% on your gross margin, maybe even 80% on your gross margin. If you are not hitting your gross margin, then it comes out of your net margin. So if I lose 10 points because I don't charge enough for my parts, or I discount stuff, or my technicians are not efficient and productive, then instead of on $1 million making 100,000, instead of making 200,000, I make $100,000. So, and there are coaching companies that will tell you it's okay, not to worry too much about your margins, to worry more about gross profit per hour. And there is something to that, but if you don't have margin, you don't have profit. And so I may have a decent gross profit margin per hour for a few hours because I did some jobs that are low margin, but when I add it with everything, it might get me in trouble financially. So what should my business earn me? I think we need to kind of begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey. I want to make about 20% net profit, and that's not my salary. So I make money as an owner in 2 different ways. I make a net profit. That's about my risk and my investment and et cetera. And then I also make a wage based on what I do for the business. So if I'm a manager, I make a manager's wage. If I'm writing service, I make a service advisor's wage. If I'm a tech in my business, then I make a tech's wage. Excuse me. And if I'm doing all those things, then I make a higher wage because now I'm making bits and pieces from each of those areas. So I think we need to keep that in mind. I mean, this is my goal. This is my target. So what's the easiest thing? The easiest thing, there's two easy things. We're going to talk about them. Not going to spend a ton of time here because I've done so many webinars and we have so much on our YouTube channel about these first two things that I'm just going to go quickly here. Install and follow a legitimate parts matrix. In other words, I have a methodology for charging parts and I stick to that methodology. And I know that some people are going to call me and say, I want to bring their own parts. That's a no-no. I don't do that. I also know that sometimes I'm going to look at a part. I'm going to say, wow, that's really, really, really expensive. And the good news is it's not coming out of my pocket. So I'm not paying the bill. The customer's paying the bill. And frankly, if you're not willing to allow me to make a profit, then I don't know that I want you as a customer. So you want to hold your margin on your parts, and therefore you need a methodology, and the best methodology is to have a parts matrix. So if you're a shop doing, say, 600,000, now you may be a shop doing 1 million and a half. I mean, we have some shops that do 10 million in a year or more, but let's say you're doing 600,000 and you actually have a parts margin that isn't 58%. Let's say you're currently doing 38%, which is not, that's fairly typical when we see a shop that really hasn't had coaching, etc. And you just raise your parts margin by 10%. So you go from 38 to 48. Now, it's not 58, but it's still more. That gives you an additional $2,250 in parts profit each month, assuming that about 45% of your sales is parts and about 55% is labor, which would be fairly typical. And that's $27,000 a year just for paying a little more attention to your parts, holding the line a little bit, making sure that your parts margins are correct. And, why am I in business? Well, I'm in business because I love helping shops, and I'm in business because I love what I do, and I love coaching, and I love doing webinars. But, I'm also couldn't be in business if I didn't make a profit and couldn't take care of my family. So you deserve to make a fair profit, decide what that is, and then stick to your parts matrix. Here's an example of a parts matrix. And again, if you go to the QR code, you can get that parts matrix. And a matrix, it's just a methodology that basically says when I get a cheap part or an inexpensive part, my cost, I might mark it up times 3.8 or even 4 times. So I take a $2 part, I charge $8 for it, and that would give me a 75% margin on that part. And so when I'm doing 75% or even 80% on a small part, then when I'm doing a big part like an engine or, I don't know, a control module, and I'm only getting 40%, when that all balances out, I end up with the 55, 58% that is the goal and the target to get our parts margin. And again, if you have questions, please ask questions. If you go to our YouTube channel, I believe that's gearforshops.com, there's more material on that. So that's all that I'm going to say there. I wouldn't be a coach or really care about the industry if I didn't say raise your labor rate. Our labor rates at this point are not enough. They're not enough to pay the technicians what we need. They're not enough to buy the equipment we need and get the training we need. And frankly, this industry is way behind in labor rates. So what does a plumber charge? Well, here in Utah, anywhere from about $300 an hour for a cheap plumber, all the way up to about $500 an hour for a great plumber. My electrician, who is a friend of mine, works for about $300 an hour when they come and do work, but his company charges $400 or $500 an hour for the work that he does working for his company. HVAC, they're $300 to $500 an hour. I just had some HVAC work done on my house, and it was about $4.50 an hour. And that's, by the way, what they charged me. If you look at the time they spent on the job and what they charged for labor, they were probably closer to $6.50 an hour. In the automotive aftermarket, Autoleap did a survey. I think we're about a year out from that survey. And the average, I think, on that survey was $128. There's a couple other companies that have done surveys. $128 would be kind of normal right now for the industry, but it should be much higher. I mean, I think I used to talk about us needing to be $250 an hour, and now I think we really need to be talking about $3 to $350 an hour as automotive businesses, because of the complexity, the education, the equipment, and the other things that I need. And then we can't even talk about lawyers and doctors and dentists. Dentists make oh my gosh, I don't even know, but dentists are the highest paid. Mini doctors, depends on which field you have, are also paid over $1,000 an hour. And I know they have medical insurance and all of that, but I have liability. I have liability insurance. I have other things that I have to pay for. So raise your labor rate. I've been doing this for, I don't know, 24, 25 years now as a coach. I've been in the industry for about 44 years. Getting old. And if I've told people all along to raise their labor rate, and we have a lot of shops that will go home and raise their labor rate from a class or a webinar by $10 an hour, and they don't get any complaints from their customers, clients, etc. Or if they have anybody complain, it's really just the 5 worst customers that you have that you're trying to maybe not work on their car anyway. I did a calculator on the average labor rate from 1980, because I owned a shop and was running shops in 1980, and I just raised the labor rate 3% a year for the cost of inflation, and that would have got us over $250 an hour as an industry if I just raised my labor rate 3%. And of course, we're certainly our inflation is much more than 3% today. I don't care what they tell us. All right. So raise your rate. What if I increase my rate by $10 an hour? If I was a shop with 3 techs with the average productivity that we have of 72%, that's 362.9 hours a month that my technicians would do based on like a 21-day month, which most months are actually 4.3 weeks or about 21 days. If I raise my labor rate by $10 an hour, that would give me an extra $3,629 in labor margins, labor profits, which is about a little over $43,000 a year. So, I also have to tell you that having talked about this for, 23, 24 years in the industry, I don't think I've ever had somebody go, I went home and raised my labor rate by $10 an hour, and my customers left me. In fact, in almost every class that I do when I'm teaching service advisors or owners and we're talking about margin, we talk about labor rate. I ask people, have you ever attended a class? Have you ever went home and raised your labor rate? And most of the class will raise their hand and say, yes, I have. And then I ask them a second question, which is, how many of your customers left you? And almost everyone in the class says none, 0, nada. So, if you're not making the profit you need, the 2 easiest things: put a parts matrix in place, follow it, don't get emotional about it. Number 2, raise your labor rate. Even if you lost 20 customers because of it, the bottom 5% of your company that average $500 a repair order, show up 1.2 times a year, I would still earn $31,000 more per year in profit by raising my labor rate $10 an hour. And there's a place where your labor rate probably is too high. I don't know what that is, because I've got clients right now that have effective labor rates well over $200 an hour. I have some clients that have posted rates well over $250 an hour. And in all the clients that I have in the company, the Institute, the ones that are doing the best, the ones that have the most consistent businesses, are the ones that are the most expensive. They have the highest labor rates. They have a more consistent business. They're able to buy nice things. They're able to provide for great technicians, great employees, etc. So raise your lab rate. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask them. I know that Amber's paying attention to that.
I am.
And now,
Oh,
go
the
ahead.
only thing I was gonna say is I think there's a really good comment to kind of just like discuss, and there has been some really good advice in the chat. So aftermarket parts and accessories generally have a set advertised price that we generally have to try and stay within. Otherwise, they think we're overpriced as they have the set retail price. And so some of the suggestions is just increase your labor rate to compensate for the loss of revenue on parts. So do you understand that?
I would argue the point about aftermarket parts. There's a cheap place to get parts. We all know that if my client goes online and they go to Amazon or any of the Rock Auto online auto parts, they can probably buy them cheaper. I believe I saw a statistic that 20% of the parts that are online are what do they call them when they're faked? They're not real. They're not coming from where you said they were coming from. So they're not good parts. 20%. Number two, I've been dealing with parts pricing for 43 plus years, because when I started in business and I was a young service advisor in my shops, or the shops I was working for, we had parts houses, and my client can go into any parts house and get a price. We have dealerships, and I think some people believe that the dealership price is the price. There's a manufactured list. Well, if you call 3 dealerships on a certain part today, call 3 Ford dealerships, 3 BMW dealerships for the same part, today you're likely to get 3 different prices. And by the way, if I don't earn enough profit on those parts, then I still don't make the money I need. So even a dealer list for me doesn't mean a thing. And I've run shops and had shops and been a service advisor and been an owner and a manager. And I've been pricing my parts based on a matrix, which often is more than the dealership might, for, I don't know, since the mid 80s. And we have a lot of shops that earn 58% margin on their parts, and which means that they're pricing dealership parts higher than maybe the dealership would. I think you have to understand that in sales, it's about creating value. I think that if I talk about going to McDonald's and getting a hamburger, that's different than going to Five Guys and getting a hamburger, and they're different prices. And it's different than going to a really nice restaurant in town and getting a hamburger, all 3 different prices. But wait a minute, doesn't McDonald's set the price on hamburgers because they're $4 a piece, or used to be 2? People go to places and do business with places more about how they feel about the place and what they believe the value is of what they get than about what the price is. And as the economy tightens, yeah, we probably have more people that are paying a little more attention to prices, but do they like our service? Do they enjoy what we do? Do we give great warranties? Do we do a great job on their vehicle? Is their experience a great experience? That allows me to price myself where I need to. And when you've worked with over 3,000 shops and you've seen that a good 20-30% of those shops, the top producers, are routinely charging matrix price parts, which are more than they could buy somewhere else, maybe, and their clients are fine with it. I think that argument goes out the window. And yeah, now there's an idea of I'll just charge more for labor and less for parts because people are paying more attention on parts. I'm not so sure that's true. When I teach classes, in a class of 200 clients and shop owners and potential clients, non-clients, and I ask, in your neighborhood, in your area, are people more focused on parts pricing or labor pricing? It's usually almost split down the middle, where 50% are saying, well, it's labor, and 50% are saying, well, it's parts. And it's your mentality. I have 2 shops in a major city in the United States that They both are really good shops. They both do really well. One of them believes that you can't get more than 50% parts margin in their area. So they're routinely around 47, 48%. The other shop believes you can get 58 and routinely gets 57, 56, 58% on their parts. Same neighborhood, same parts, same places. Why does one person get more than the other? I think it's about, do you believe in your product? Do you believe that the value of your product, can you build that value for your client? What's your marketing? There's so many variables. And I can tell you from having taught, I don't know, 20,000 service advisors in the past 20 years, maybe even more than that. The service advisors that believe in their pricing can build value for their clients are always going to get more margin, and their clients are going to buy more at a higher price. I don't know if that helps, doesn't help, but there it is. I really want to spend some time on this idea of increasing your productivity, because there's really two types of margin that we have. We have parts margin and we have labor margin. And most labor margin problems are not are productivity problems, not pricing problems, really. Although, again, you could probably raise your rates a little and nobody's going to pay attention or really care that much. So I want to kind of go through several things that are productivity related or productivity issued, because the more hours that my hourly or salaried tech can do in an 8-hour day that I can sell to a customer, the higher my labor margin, the higher my profit. So in my shop, over the 6.5-year period, the last shop I ran personally, we had 119% productivity out of our techs because we did a lot of these things exceptionally well. So I'm going to talk about those. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Currently, the average productivity in the United States is about 72%. That's from surveys and stuff over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that we have seen. In any given year, it might be 73% or 74%, or it could even be 70%. That number's been very consistent for a long time in our industry. The shops that we work with probably are much closer to 100%. I would tell you we're probably in the very high 90s for many of the shops that we work with, if not most of the shops that we work with, or above. And it's about these things. So if you take a 3-tech shop, I've got 3 techs, I'm $128 an hour, and I have a 45 to 55% parts to labor ratio, and you look at what they're actually doing, I should be doing $1,369,805 in sales, but I'm actually doing $986,259. So there's a very big difference between what I'm actually doing and what I'm doing. And by the way, if I'm paying hourly or salary to my employee, when I'm doing 986,000, I might be paying out 250,000 to my techs. And when I'm doing 1.36 million, 1.37 million, I'm still paying the same amount out to my techs. So when I'm doing more, I have a much higher labor margin. So costing this shop, because of their productivity, 383,000 in annual sales and 76,000 in profit if you look at a 20% net profit. So what do I do to fix that? We talk a lot about management. I have this visual. I'm a very visual person, so I'm looking at this particular visual, and it's a wall. So I'm looking at a wall that's made up of bricks, and there are 2 types of bricks in my wall. So in my business, there are walls that we come up against, and our employees come up against them. We as a company come up against the wall. And there are 2 types of bricks in this wall. One is a company brick, and the other is an employee brick. So if we looked at bricks, here's a wall with bricks in it. And as a manager or an owner, I want to get rid of the bricks because I want to get on the other side of the wall. And bricks for company bricks would be things like scheduling. If you're not scheduling properly, your technician shows up at 8, they don't have cars. If you're not, they get done with their car at 10, but I don't have another car scheduled till noon. then they don't have work to do. That's a scheduling problem. If you're have waiters and you're pulling your tech off of a $6,000 job, and for a waiter, in a way, that's a scheduling problem. So you're doing a waiter oil change where you're really not making money and pulling them off of a $3,000, $5,000 job, and then they have to get back to that job. They have to get caught up. That will cause inefficiency and productivity loss. Tools in education. Do you have the right tools? Are they in the right place in the shop? Can the techs diagnose or do the job in a reasonable amount of time? Again, we're going to talk a little bit about book time before we're done today. Can they beat book time in doing a normal job? We have a lot of shops where we have techs that are probably under qualified trying to do diagnosis on a vehicle where we've told the customer it's going to be $150, $100, whatever, and the tech is taking 3, 4, and 5 hours to do that diagnostic. That's a brick that's in my wall that's keeping me from being profitable and keeping my tech from being productive. And that brick is it's an education brick. Do they know enough? Have we taught them enough? Have they taken enough classes? Dispatch is a company brick. Are we dispatching properly? I would tell you to dispatch all the cars, get them all in the morning for the day, dispatch them all, and then manage your flow throughout the day, as opposed to scheduling customers all throughout the day. And the reason why is when your technician has 3 cars instead of one sitting here, if they have one sitting here and it's a 2-hour job, there's a law, can't remember the name, Tony's law or whatever it is. It's not Pareto's law, it's a different one, but it basically says that a technician will make the available amount of work fit the available amount of time. And my history, my experience is that's true. If I give a tech a 2-hour job and they think they don't have anything for the next 3 hours, they'll fill in and that job will take 3 hours. If I give a tech, a 6-hour job with maybe 5 hours of time to do it, my techs would get the job done in 5 hours or maybe even less. And if the tech has one job that's a 2-hour job and another job that's a 6-hour job, and they start the 2-hour job and they know they have the 6-hour job, they'll work at a different pace. They'll get the 2-hour job done faster because they have another job lined up that they know needs to be done and should be done today. Estimating. Are you estimating the proper amounts of time? And we'll talk about that a little more. Parts. Are we getting parts in a timely fashion? Are we getting good parts? Are we matching those parts up, or do we wait until 2 days later when the car gets pulled in to check the part and see if it's the right part, and then we find out it's not the right part? So parts can be a brick. Culture. We have a culture of laziness. We have a culture of, well, it doesn't really matter what we get done. Or do we have a culture of we want to produce 120%, 9.6 hours per day? What's the culture of the business? Those are company bricks. And unfortunately, when I look at poor productivity in shops, and I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've probably personally been in over 2,000 shops, reviewing their stuff, their work orders, their productivity, their processes. You have a lot of employees that are underproducing because the company has not removed the bricks, has not solved these problems. You have employee bricks. What are employee bricks? Organization, the employee's not organized. They don't keep their tools. They spend 10 minutes looking for a 10-millimeter socket because they can't remember, because they don't have a structure and an organization about how they take care of their tools, or even how they work. Teaching kind of a work process. You get a car in, it's got a check engine light on. What do you do first, right? For me, it's like research, run the code, but kind of do a little history on the car, take a look at the car, research the code. What's the code about, etc. Because if I do that, I spend that time there, I can be more organized in my approach. And if I have an organized approach, I'm probably going to be more efficient and more productive. Tools. Do they have the right tools themselves? Do they know how to use them? Skills. Do they have the right skills? You notice I said education in the top, company brick. Are we educating our people? In the bottom, I said skills for the employees. My employees may have lack of skills in certain areas, but it is up to me as a company to educate them. But it's also up to my employee to keep their skill sets up. Work ethic, attitude. You know, I've had employees work for me that got a bad attitude, whatever was going on in their life, whatever was going on, you know, in their work. They got tired of doing brake jobs or whatever. They just had bad attitudes, and the attitude affects productivity. So if I can help the employee understand that their attitude is not in a good place and we have a good culture in our company, then I can work with them and then they'll be more productive. Teach them good work habits. So I have this as a manager in a business. I have this vision of this wall that has these bricks. And if I am managing you and you're my employee and you're not, you know, producing what you should, you have too high of a comeback rate, your attitude is poor, I'm going to look at the bricks and try to determine, you know, do you have a poor attitude because the company's holding you back? Are you not as productive as you need to be because the company is holding you back, our processes, our systems? Or is it something that you're holding yourself back? And I would tell you, it's probably in the beginning, with an employee, you got a good employee and their productivity starts to go down, etc. It's probably 80% or 90% company bricks and 10 or 20% personal bricks. And then over time, if we don't solve the company bricks, then it's maybe 50% or 60% company bricks and 40 or 50% employee bricks getting in the way. And what we need to be doing as management is we need to be identifying and removing those bricks. And so if my job as the manager, my job is to make sure that you hit your goals and targets so the company can hit their goals and targets, then I need to be identifying the bricks. And then where it's my responsibility, solving those problems, where it's your responsibility, helping you understand how to solve those problems yourself or helping you identify those problems. And in a way, maybe holding you accountable or helping you accept responsibility for your own issues and problems. I think we have a real management crisis. I would also tell you we have a customer service crisis in this industry and probably in our in the United States, Canada. But I would also say we have a management kind of crisis because we have a lot of people in management that they don't have good habits. They're not, you know, finding and removing the bricks on a constant basis. Again, if there's any questions, please ask them. And all right, so that was kind of a preemptor to the 3, 4, and 5. Number 3, make sure you're using a labor multiplier and that labor multiplier is appropriate. Why do we use a labor multiplier? Why am I charging, if the book says it's a 3-hour job, why am I charging 4 hours for that job? Well, the book and the labor guides really don't consider the test drive. It's not included. The write-up, the paperwork, the time that the tech is now spending in creating the story and saying this is what happened. Go back 25 years ago, we didn't have our techs write up what was going on with the car or why it needed what it needed. We basically had, you know, in many cases, the technician walking into the service advice saying this car needs brakes and here you go and away you go. Now we've got technicians in AutoLeap writing stories out and taking their time, and many technicians are not great typers. Some of them are not great spellers. So it takes them longer. None of that is considered in the labor guidebooks. The age and condition of the components, that's not considered. When they're setting labor times, they're working on brand new cars that haven't been sitting around for a long time, that haven't had issues, that haven't had another technician over tighten bolts or, you know, screw something up. They're also not considering cleanup time. And I call those brown bananas. And so, you know, in the grocery store, interestingly enough, the margins are very low. And the grocery store has a thing called a loss rate. A loss rate is things that are stolen, and things that spoil, things that go bad. And so my grocery store is going to buy, I don't know, 10,000 bananas this week, but they're not going to sell 10,000 bananas because some people are going to grab a banana and eat it as they walk through the grocery store and then throw the peel, in with the milk. Some people are going to steal a banana, put it in their pocket and walk out of the store with it. And some bananas are going to go brown and go bad where nobody will buy them and they end up getting thrown away. And what the grocery store does is they charge a little more for the green bananas so that they can pay for the brown bananas and the leakage, the loss rate. Our loss rate, our leakage is in test drives and write-ups and the age and condition of the components. Our brown bananas are, other techs have screwed things up and now the job is harder than it's supposed to be. Ours is in the cleanup. These are our brown bananas, and frankly, customers have to pay for those brown bananas. So we use a labor multiplier or a labor matrix today. And I can also tell you that 20 years ago, we didn't. Today we do. Most of the shops that we work with. And by the way, when I say most, I would say 100%. But then somebody might go, well, I know Bob and he doesn't. But I'll tell you right now, of the hundreds of shops that we work with, every one of them, unless they're just coming into our program, they don't understand it, uses a labor multiplier. And that multiplier today in most shops is somewhere between 20 and 30%. And I do know that some of my BMW guys are using a higher multiplier because of the way that BMW does their labor guides, but a minimum of 20% and probably to 30% on a labor multiplier. If I use a 25% labor multiplier and I have 3 techs doing, 72%, 362.9 hours, and I multiply that by 1.25, that's 453.6 hours. That extra 90.7 hours at $128 an hour is going to generate $11,610 per month. And by the way, that's going to add to my labor margin. It will add to my productivity depending on how I'm defining. I can define productivity by dollars or hours produced. And the labor multiplier, if it's an hour, and now we're charging 1.25, if it's 6 hours, and now we're charging, whatever it is, 8 point whatever, that's going to add to my profit. And so in a typical shop with 3 techs doing 72%, number one, your 72% is going to go up. Number two, giving you a better labor margin. Number two, you're going to get more money for that job. And you're going to put $139,000 into your gross profit, most of which will probably fall into your bottom line profit. And again, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. Next, find your leakages. This goes back kind of to the wall. Where is labor leaking through my shop? And I'm going to talk about a few different areas that we see that are fairly common. Every shop we have has some labor leakage, meaning we don't charge enough, we don't get enough, our tech takes longer, sometimes we don't charge at all. And so here's a few areas. Number one, in your canned jobs. A lot of times we have canned jobs that were put in 6 years ago, 8 years ago, and even though we've raised our labor rates, we have not done any adjustment to our canned jobs. So, an oil change that used to be $39 average is probably now $89 average because of components and costs of parts, but also because of labor increases and if we have a canned job that's $39 oil change and we've raised the rates everywhere else, maybe it's time to raise the rate on some of our canned jobs. And I always tell my clients, if you don't think you can go all the way to 89, between 39 and 89, where do you think you can go? That's kind of a management methodology. It's a sales methodology, but it's okay, I can't stay at 39. I don't know that I want to go to 89. So I don't know, take it to 49, get another $10. That's going to increase your margin. And if you're putting that in labor, it's going to increase your productivity and your labor profits. Charging, we do this all the time. I go into shops and I sit down in their office and I read a People magazine or whatever you got, or I'm on my phone, but I'm paying attention and I'm watching. And what happens is customer calls and says, "Hey, I've got a problem with my car. It doesn't run right, or it's got this, or it's got that." And we go, "Okay, let's get it in." And that's going to be, I don't know, $140. That's my 1 hour diagnostic. And if you got a good salesperson, when the customer comes in, or good service advisor, when the customer comes in, they'll ask them, "Is there anything else that we can do while you're here? Is there anything else going on besides that one problem?" And I'll see a customer say, "Yeah, I've got this really bad rattle coming from the rear of the car when I go over bumps." And service advisor will write that down. And then, yeah, and I've got this weird electrical issue. My driver's door, sometimes it doesn't roll down automatically. I have to turn the car on and off, or I have to jiggle the switch or bang the door, whatever it is. And they'll write that down. And now I've got a technician's got 3 problems to diagnose in really 3 different areas, but we never increased the time. So now I'm giving a technician, instead of one potentially, MIL problem, now I'm giving them 3 different problems, but I'm only sending it out for 1 hour. And so I would be teaching and training the service advisors how to sell the additional labor to the customer at the time. And in my world, crazy as that might be, if you don't want to pay me to fix the rattle or to find out what it is, then I don't want to fix it. I don't like working for free. Just I've been doing this so long that I see this happening and I see this labor leakage, and then at the end the shop's not making the money they need. So this is an area that I can go in, I can pay more attention to times, I can make sure my service advisors are um uh paying attention to times. My technicians, when they had an hour-long diagnostic, they had a 45-minute timer. They put on at the end of 45 minutes, they stopped whether they had finished the diagnostic or not. I taught my techs, "Tell me what you've done. What tests have you run? What have you found? Tell me what additional tests you think you need to run to diagnose the car, and tell me how long you think that's going to take." And then we went to the customer and talked about their car, what we've found, what we've done, the additional tests that we need. I go to the doctor the other day, and I'm in the doctor's office. I paid my deductible. The doctor gave me a shot in my shoulder. I've got a problem in my shoulder, so that was another $79 once I paid for what I had to pay for. And then the doctor said, "You know what, Cecil, I think we might have a problem with XYZ. I want to do a blood panel on you because you've got this issue, blah, blah, blah." So now I'm going to the lab, and now they're going to run blood work, and I'm going to pay an additional fee for that blood work. I mean, we're so used to doing it everywhere else. We need to be conscious of that here. Uh, Paying 5/10 with no charge for an inspection. I tell my shops, get rid of your oil change, stop changing oil, stop talking about it that way, start talking about servicing the car. Instead of having a $69, $89 oil change, have $139 service of the vehicle that includes the oil and filter, but also the inspection. So maybe I'm paying my tech 5/10, and right now I'm getting nothing. I don't care if you get another 2/10 out of it, or another 3/10 or another 5/10. Get something out of it. And then when you're estimating, a lot of times because of your process, the service advisor is the one doing the estimate, but the technician is the one that looked at the car. So broken bolts, rust, cleanup, things like that are not being considered in the time. So make sure that your techs are aware of that so that they can let your service advisors know. And if that gets you another, I don't know, a few hours. So what if I captured an hour a day per tech? And again, in that same 3 tech shop, that's $99,000 a year by capturing an hour a day because I worked in these 5 areas. Just doing a little in each area could produce another hour per tech per day. if I'm willing to do the management and pay the time. Number 5, look at your workflow, because this is the thing that holds your techs up from being productive probably the most. And make sure that you have good scheduling, good dispatch, and really great estimating process. How quickly can I get that estimate done properly through and back to my tech? And a lot of shops, that's taking 2 hours and 3 hours when it really should only be taking 30 or 40 minutes. And it's because in many cases the service advisor doesn't have the information that the service advisor needs. So in my shop, our techs gave us 4 pieces of information, because as a service advisor, I needed those 4 pieces of information in order to do an estimate, do it quickly, and do it accurately. So number 1, what does the car need? In other words, here's the problem, Cecil. Okay. Number 2, why does it need that? Well, here's why it's broken. It failed the test. It's out of spec. It's leaking, whatever that is. And I used to tell my people, my techs, I used to say, if you could describe it in a paragraph, describe it in a paragraph. But if you can describe it in one sentence, do that instead of a paragraph. And if you could describe it in 2 words instead of a sentence, then do it that way. So like in my shop, we created standards and we created kind of a shorthand so that my tech could say to me, this is 0% on tires and on brakes. 0% means it's time to replace the tires and brakes because they're worn out. We had these, this is a leak. Well, a leak is different than a drip. A drip gets on the ground. A leak is actually leaking, but getting in the belly pan and not reaching the ground. So now I can talk to the client and speak better about it. How much, what does the car need? Why? How much time do you think it's going to take? Because if you're the tech and you look at this thing and you see that somebody else has jacked it up, or there's it's really rusted, or, oh my gosh, this is an intake on, an exhaust manifold on this kind of vehicle. And man, I don't know how many of these I've taken off where almost every single time one of the bolts is broken. Then let us know that, because as a service advisor, I don't know that. And I might just look at the book time and estimate it per the book time when I need to be considering that there's going to be a broken bolt. So in your estimating process, make sure that this additional stuff is being told to you by the tech. And then last but not least, what parts do you need? That will help us on getting the parts, getting the right parts, getting all the parts you need as a service advisor. So my guys did all of this, and it only took them a few minutes, but what it did was keep me as a service advisor from walking out in the shop, grabbing that tech away from the job that he's doing, having a 5-minute conversation or 7 or 8-minute conversation about what was needed and why it was needed. And, is there something else I need? What parts? And so it really improved the time that I was spending with the custom, with the estimate, because I wasn't walking out there to have that conversation. I rarely went out in the shop, and we have some service advice say, well, I got to see it before I can sell it. I'm sorry. I personally don't agree with that. I've seen lots of bad brakes. I've seen lots of oil leaks. I've seen, I don't know, 1 million tires that were worn out. I've seen, exhaust systems falling apart 1,000 times. As a service advisor, having done it for so long, I've seen all this. I don't need to see it again. If I have a good trust between myself and a good communication between myself and the tech, it will create more efficiency, which gives the service advisor more time to spend on the estimate, which gets the estimate out faster. And it also will increase the time for the technician. So if I spend my time here, it's going to reduce time spent later by both of us and improve the workflow. I get the estimate out faster. The faster I get the estimate out, the more time the tech has to get it done, the more likely they're going to get it done faster, blah, 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 on and on and on, infinitum. So I'm going to work on my workflow. I'm going to improve my estimating process. And it seems really simple, and it really is. But in many cases, we don't have a good estimating process and or process if you're in Canada. And um, it takes additional time, which is one of the things that's killing the technician's productivity and actually hampering the service advisor's productivity. So what if I did that and I improved that workflow? And if you had an effective labor rate, here's the formula to determine what your hour's worth. So in a shop that has a $128 effective labor rate, um, uh, uh, it's the formula to understand what your hour's worth is 1 plus parts over labor. If 45% of what you do is parts and 55% is labor, then you're 128 times 1.82, meaning that your hours were $232.96. Every time you sell one, that's what it's worth. Every time a technician does one, that's what it's worth. Well, what if I improve my workflow process so that now my technician could get more work done because the estimates are happening quicker, there's less time spent on verbal and face-to-face communication, etc. And I could put another hour and a half into my day, right? And so now I take an hour and a half. Now that, by the way, if I've got 3 techs, it's a half an hour a tech. And if I did that 250 days a year, that's $87,000. What if I only got half of that? What if I only recovered 15 minutes a day per tech? Well, that would be another $43,000 in my shop. So in order to really increase your margin, you have to become efficient and productive, and you have to be charging properly. And you have to, again, in order to charge properly, you have to learn how to sell properly and build value for your clients, etc. But okay, well, what if we put all of it together? What if we just did a little of everything? And so we're going to increase our parts margin by 10%. That's going to bring us about $27,000. I'm going to increase my labor rate by $10 an hour. That's going to bring me $43,000. I'm going to increase my labor multiplier or use one if I'm not. That's going to bring me $139,000. I'm going to reduce my leakage 1 hour a day per tech. That's going to bring me 99, almost $100,000. And I'm going to improve my workflow. Just by adding 1.5 hours a day, by looking at the bricks and getting rid of the bricks, that's going to give me 87,000. So, and the total there is almost $400,000. Well, what if I only got half of that? What if I could only do half of it? And what if I only got half of that to drop to my bottom line? That's $100,000 a year. And so sometimes I look at this overwhelming, like, man, I'm working my butt off. I'm not getting the profits I want or need. This is difficult. The other thing that happens when you clean up these processes and we start tearing the bricks down, your employees see that their job is easier. They're more fulfilled. When they're more fulfilled, they're actually more productive. There are side benefits to doing these things, and not just the profit that you might make, but it's a happier environment. Now I have money to pay people more than I would have paid them, and to motivate them to be even more productive. So anyway, that's, I'm constantly working on tearing down the bricks in the wall. You have to be doing that if your shop is not at 20% net. If your goal is 62% or 64% gross profit with a loaded labor and you're not there, then what are the bricks? And how do I take them down? So we're close to the end. We got another 5-6 minutes. Amber, do we have questions?
Yeah. So what is the best way to inform a customer that the job is going to take more labor than what the customer approved job for? Maybe.
Well, I think number one, don't create the expectation that, my diag is the final thing. When I'm sorry, it sounds like I cut you off, Amber. I didn't mean to do that.
No, you're good. It was just, he was given an example, but you go.
Yeah. When I'm setting the diagnostic up as a service advisor, almost every customer, I'm like, by the way, when we get this done, sometime at real close to 1 o'clock, are you available? I'm going to call you and we're going to talk about it. And if there's anything that we need to do to take care of this problem, then we're going to talk about what that cost is. And I think there are jobs where you should be able to go, this is the price. So, I'm doing a brake job. Gosh, if we can't estimate a brake job accurately and I got to call the guy back and talk about extra money, maybe we're just not doing as good a job as we should. But there are other jobs, like when you get into an evap system, I'm going to run these tests, and this may not diagnose the whole thing. I may have to replace a component, and then there might be additional efforts. Or when I get into a car, customer calls me on the phone. I know nothing about the car. I've had customers call me and tell me they had a Toyota Corolla, and when they came in, it wasn't even a Toyota. And they don't even know what they're driving. And so, all we know is that there's a check engine light. I'm not guaranteeing in that hour that I can diagnose and tell you what's wrong with your car. I'm going to run some tests. I can tell you that probably 70% of the time we can figure it out in an hour. I've got great techs, but I may have to call you to talk about additional testing. If you prep your customer in the beginning, it's much easier. And a lot of times we have owners that are nervous or scared to make those calls because they're really not salespeople and they are so invested and they're really afraid. I just don't want my customers to hate me. And they're very careful about what they do. I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, broken bolt. Well, broken bolt's a broken bolt. I didn't make the car. I didn't drive the car. I didn't buy the car. I didn't get the benefit of it. Why am I paying for a broken bolt? And by the way, if you're a tech or you're working on cars, occasionally a bolt's going to break. And if you're blaming the tech for that, now, by the way, if I have a tech who keeps breaking bolts, maybe I better teach them how to take out a difficult bolt. But if I have a tech who doesn't normally break bolts, it's not a thing, and the bolt breaks, is it our fault or is it a condition of the vehicle? And if it's a condition of the vehicle, is it my responsibility or is it the owner's responsibility? So I have no problem calling up and saying, while we were doing this, there's a bolt that broke coming out. This happens occasionally. I hate to be making this call, but here's what we need in order to take care of that. And I will tell you, the clients that we've worked with that have actually gone back and been able to do that, 99% of their clients don't argue about it. They're just like, okay, I go to the dentist. I don't think I have any cavities. When he comes in and says I have a cavity, I'm like, okay, fix it. And he digs in and he gets too deep and he goes, oh, we're going to have a root canal. I don't go, well, wait a minute, it's your fault. I'm like, oh, that's horrible. I hate to pay for a root canal. Okay, take care of it. I think in this industry, we're just so emotionally attached and just afraid that our customers are going to hate us because it wasn't exactly what we said. I don't know. I've been doing this a long, long time. And I can't tell you how many times I've called customers later and said, hey, while we were there, we found this. And here's what it's going to take for us to take care of that. And I would just do it without any emotion. I mean, yeah, I feel bad for the customer, but I don't feel bad for me. I didn't do anything wrong. It's their car. I don't know if that answers it or not. Amber, do you have a couple more?
No more questions at this time, just some kind of comments and suggestions on how other people handle that as well, which I love that
Okay.
you guys are engaging in that and helping each other. If you guys want to give it another minute, we can ask any questions or any last minute thoughts, Cecil, from you.
I would just say, for management wise, you need to be looking at your business. You have goals and you need to feel like these are the targets I want to hit: 20% net, X% gross profit. And I'm going to manage my business and look at that wall and tear those bricks out and get rid of those bricks constantly because, it's amazing. You can tear the whole wall down and then, 2 weeks later, someone's putting another brick or two on the wall. So for me, it's manage it. And then I'm also I didn't buy the car. I didn't build it. I didn't drive it. I didn't break it. it's not my responsibility. My job is to help the customer understand what they need to do that well, but not perfectly. I don't have perfect techs. I'm not a perfect person. I have never met a perfect person. There's a few people that come fairly close there, Amber, but
Oh,
never met a
I was
perfect
gonna say, I
person.
hope that's me. I see what you did there. I love
I
that.
did.
Hey,
I went there.
I thank you. Made my day. What are your thoughts on commission-based techs versus non-commission-based?
I don't like flat rate. In some states, it really does violate the labor laws today. I think there's a real black cloud over flat rate today, and if you're paying attention to the blogs and the online channels and all of that, there's a lot of techs they've just been used and abused. The problem with flat rate is it puts almost all of the responsibility and all of the um, risk on the technician's shoulders. The problem with hourly is that it puts all the risk on the business, and the technicians have no push, no drive. And so I like to build what we call performance enhanced pay plans. I do it all the time, probably 4 or 5 a week for our clients, which are a combination, kind of a blend where there's a reasonable base, probably somewhere 60 to 70% of what I can pay for that position. And then there's a bonus structure around performance and education and things that I want from that position. And so my thoughts on, commission only, by the way, I was always a commission guy. As a business owner, I'm 100% a commission guy. My company doesn't make money. I don't survive. But I think today in the marketplace, it's more difficult to get techs that way. And I really think we need to rethink the way we have paid technicians, service advisors in the past, and really think about a new model for that. And my model for that is kind of a blended, where the technician knows that they're going to make money. If you follow Maslow, Maslow says if you can't take care of your basic needs, then you can't think about higher function things, God, how to do this better, being productive. And so I'm not a giant fan of commission only, although I'll tell you, I will also have technicians and owners that will say, wait a minute, I love that because I can go out and do 80 hours and make twice the money. Okay, great. You should.
Love that. One last question, and of
Okay.
course, guys, if you guys want to put up the screen on how people can reach out to you again while we answer this last one. Preston said, I work on classic cars and many clients have purchased their own parts before they find me. They're usually the same parts I would have bought anyway. I have taken those jobs in, but increased my labor rate to accommodate the lost parts margin. I don't feel like I have the best delivery on explaining why. I'd be curious if you have input on that scenario and explaining it to the client.
If you reach out to me, I have a whole write-up on that's one page for clients. There's 3 reasons not to do parts that the customer supplies. One is I don't know the provenance of the part. I don't know the quality of the part, the fit of the part. There are 20% crappy parts online. And then, I'm an opinionated guy because I was a tech. And so there are certain places where if you got the part there, I don't feel good about putting it on your car. So one reason is that, and the provenance issue is an issue for me and my liability and my insurance. So my insurance finds out I'm putting parts on your car that you're supplying. That creates more risk for them. They can raise my rates or cancel me. Okay. So they could literally say, where'd that part come from? And I'm like, well, the customer supplied it. And then they'll say, I'm not taking care of that. And I could have a $12,000 engine job go bad that now I'm responsible for, because the second reason is the courts see us as the experts. So if I go to court, whether the customer supplied the part or not, the judge believes I'm the expert. So I should have known that that part was not a good part or not a high quality part or whatever. And so I'm responsible for warranting that part, whether or not I made the profit on the part that I want to or I need to. And then the third reason is part of the money I make in this industry, and maybe, 20 years from now, that won't be it. We'll just give parts away for free, but we'll charge 5 times the labor. I don't know. But today, a good portion, 40% of my profits or 45% of my profits come from parts. And so if I'm taking their parts in and I'm not raising the labor rate high enough, or I'm not financially in a place to even hold up the warranty. So there's three great reasons not to do that. And I would literally tell you, show me a restaurant in town that will let you bring your own steak and that will cook it and take any of the risk at all. Just show me one restaurant, and then we'll have a different conversation about parts. And don't tell me it's my best friend, my buddy who owns a restaurant who I help and I go in. No, that doesn't count. Just show me a restaurant where it's not your friend, where you could go in, an Outback, a Longhorn Steakhouse, anywhere else where I could take my own steak and they're going to cook it and lower the price of the meal for me. Show me where that's going to happen, and then we'll have a different conversation on parts. Don't do it. That's my answer.
Well said. That's what they said. So appreciate it, guys. I put some key takeaways in the chat. There is a survey, but we will also send it out afterwards. Again, this session was recorded, so you will get access to that following. We really appreciate it, Cecil. A lot of compliments, excellent points. Thank you. So we look forward to having you on our next webinar.